This is the age of the city. For the first time in human history, more people live in urban than rural settlements. The world's urban population is growing by 70 million people each year. 301 cities account for 50% of global GDP. This will rise to 66% by 2025. So if we don't get things right in our cities, then the consequences for humanity are profound.
Cities are critically important to the global economy and to progress in the global economy. Cities can be sources of chaos as well as development.
This dual personality of cities is what makes them so alluring and so vital. They can be dangerous places, but cities are where fortunes can be made.
One of the primary factors driving urbanization is opportunity. You live on a farm and you're growing crops, you don't have a lot of opportunity. You see a bustling, growing city, your friends are moving there, they're getting jobs in offices, maybe jobs in a manufacturing center. There's restaurants, there's culture, there's life. This is attractive. This is attractive and something you want to be a part of.
And everything is relative. You know, they'll have greater access to schools, greater access to healthcare, greater access to employment, and a much less vulnerable economic life.
In 1900, 12 of the world's biggest cities were in North America or Europe. 100 years later, this number had fallen to just 2. Most of the biggest cities of the future will be in the developing economies of Asia and Africa.
Most of the growth in cities is going to be in China, India, and Nigeria. Those 3 countries alone will account for 37% of the world's urban population. Just staggering numbers. Here's an example: Lagos, the biggest city in Nigeria. Its population every year is adding the equivalent of the population of Boston.
The urbanization rate in the US, Japan, it's over 70%. In China, it's still 50%. So China may have a lot of megacities, they may have a lot of larger cities, but those cities are either going to get bigger or there's going to be more of them. So I think that's going to be a trend. And I think a lot of emerging markets, especially those with large populations, are going to experience trends like that in the next 50 years.
This incredible rate of growth makes the challenges of managing a large city even more difficult.
The biggest risks facing cities are the same risks that challenge all of us. Politically, governance, climate change, economic inequality, productivity, economic growth, employment, education, transportation. Those issues that face cities are the same that face everyone, except in a much more concentrated way.
One city battling with many of these problems is Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Alessandra Orofino is on the front line trying to solve them. She believes the world's biggest cities are in danger of sinking under a tide of poverty, decrepit infrastructure, and citizens' apathy. And unless we do something about it, billions will suffer the consequences.
The kind of urbanization that we have today can only go so far. If we do not change the way we design our cities, if we do not make cities change with us, we're going to have very serious limits to urbanization. Cities will become impossible to manage, impossible to live in, and just very miserable places to be. I think if we change that process, those limits could change dramatically and potentially be non-existent. But that requires that we think deeply about the environments that we want to be in and how we can better build them together.
Managing megacities is one of the great challenges facing the world. This is Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Nearly 12 million people crowd into its metro area. It is beautiful and vibrant, but it also has its problems. Crime, inequality, and poverty. Alessandra Orofino is an urban activist and thinker who has lived and worked in megacities on 3 different continents. She has worked with the United Nations on its Sustainable Development Goals and founded the groundbreaking Meu Rio, an NGO that uses data gathered from citizens to raise campaigns and solve thorny issues posed by the rapid growth of the city. Meu Rio has 170,000 activists, and Alessandra hopes it can become a model for other rapidly growing cities around the globe.
We build upon a rich tradition of neighborhood movements, not only in Brazil, but all over the world, and we try to sort of bring it to the 21st century in a way that makes sense for people. I was born in this city, in Rio de Janeiro, and my family has a very sort of mixed background. My father comes from a neighborhood in Rio that was quite dangerous in the 90s, quite poor, or lower middle class, and my mom comes from a very wealthy background, one of the best neighborhoods in Rio. It taught me that this city can be amazing, but it can also be very rough and unequal, and that's not just a characteristic of this city. I think it's something that we are seeing increasingly in cities around the world.
Rio de Janeiro is similar to many emerging megacities. Some neighborhoods are as wealthy as anywhere on the planet. Others remain impoverished and cut off. Bridging this gap will, Alessandra believes, have profound benefits for us all.
Cities bring people closer together, and they have this intensity in them, this density in them. They're definitely the places where most innovation will naturally happen, because it's very hard to innovate when you're always talking to the same people and hearing the same thoughts. And cities are the exact contrary of that. They are natural hubs for innovation, natural hubs for economic growth, and they tend to be the engines of growth in most countries.
But when this growth is rapid and unplanned, the results are gridlocked streets, poisoned air, and an infrastructure that simply cannot cope.
Well, I come from a city that expanded too rapidly, for sure. How do you create sidewalks, sewage systems, schools, mobility systems to cater to a growing population? If that rapid urban expansion is happening in environments where inequality is paramount, the challenges are even bigger.
In a megacity, one of the biggest challenges can be simply getting from A to B.
Our mobility systems, in general, very few exceptions, suck. When you have a poor mobility system, you just preclude entire segments of the population from living the city, from actually accessing the opportunities and the beauties and the amazingness that cities have, right? Because it's very hard for them to get around. You also preclude the rich people in the city from getting to know other areas in the city, which can be incredibly exciting and a fulfilling experience in and of itself. So you're creating a city in which everyone is living in their own territory, which is terrible.
At the forefront of these infrastructure problems are the city's poor. They can become physically cut off from the economic opportunities that living in a city provides.
The poor pay the brunt of most things, and I think that includes rapid expansion of cities. The fact that in the developing world, 1/3 of the population is living in slums is something that none of us should accept as we grow and as we think about the planet in which we want to live.
Slums are a result of rapid, unplanned expansion. Today, an estimated 863 million people live in slums. If the 104 million slum dwellers in India were a separate nation, they would be the 13th most populous country in the world. But slums are not always hopeless places.
The poor are not just sitting, waiting for the government to do something for them, they're creating their own urban environments. So if you go to a slum in Rio, you see that most of that infrastructure was built by the community itself over the years. So there is a level of do-it-yourself, a level of initiative that you see a lot more in poor neighborhoods than rich neighborhoods, precisely because the government wasn't there.
This means slums must be handled delicately by urban planners.
What do we do with areas that were developed by communities, but lack infrastructure. Even if we're assuming goodwill in terms of how we handle them, even if the only thing that we want to do is provide those areas with good quality public services, there are choices that need to be made in terms of which pieces of that infrastructure do we leave, which pieces do we change, knowing that it was built by the people. If we don't handle that process in a way that is human and intelligent and actually aims at protecting the interests of the poor communities, we can end up with massive waves of dislocation and destroying an urban fabric and a social fabric that is so important and so vital. Here in Rio, we have a neighborhood called Santa Teresa, and in that neighborhood we have a tram. It's a historical tram, it's beautiful. Most trams in Rio were destroyed earlier in the 20th century. In Santa Teresa, the neighbors organized and kept their tram. It's a point of pride for them. Santa Teresa was a forgotten neighborhood for a while. It became a lot poorer. And then in the past 5 to 6 years, it has been gentrifying really quickly. And the government decided to turn that tram, which is one of the very few remaining in the city, into a tourist attraction. But what the neighbors said at that point was, the only reason why this tram still exists, and it's vintage and kind of hipstery and amazing, it's because we organized and we kept it here. They created that value. They created the richness of that community. And we see that all over the world.
Alessandra believes cities often ignore this creativity. The result is a democratic deficit which erodes faith in the city's government and alienates already vulnerable communities. Alessandra believes cities must take their citizens with them if they are to expand successfully.
I think what we have definitely not gotten right is the process by which we involve citizens. I have not seen one case of a city that has really used the collective intelligence of its citizens and distributed power in a way that makes it actually possible for people to influence the way the city evolves. And when we get that right, I think we'll solve a lot of the other issues that we see.
But for us to truly harness the power of our cities, we need to heal the divisions within them first.
If we keep building unequal cities, cities that are not sustainable, and cities that are not very good to live in for most of their population, I don't think we can actually hope to be happy in these urban spaces. The worst case scenario for the global city of the future would be cities that do not have a soul and therefore become less and less attractive to entrepreneurs, to people who do want to create new economic activity, and that ultimately also become less wealthy.
Across the ocean from Rio, another giant city is growing. Lagos is now the most economically important city in Africa, but its growing pains are excruciating and threatening the futures of 21 million people. More people live in cities than ever before. But many of the world's biggest cities are struggling to cope. Lagos, on Nigeria's Atlantic coast, is the largest city in the world without a city-wide rail system, meaning everyone has to travel by road. For workers like Abraham Cole, this means his daily commute takes over his life.
What time did you wake up?
This morning I woke up like 3 o'clock, 3:30. Well, I usually don't do breakfast because it kind of slows me down.
In 3 years, the population of Lagos has nearly doubled from 11 million to 21 million. But this staggering expansion has overwhelmed the city's impoverished infrastructure.
How long should it take you to get to the
It
office?
should take me 45 minutes to get to the office.
But in full traffic, in full rush hour, how long does that take?
You probably would do like some 6-7 hours in traffic, 3 hours going, 3-4 hours coming back. It's much worse coming back. Coming back is something else. And I don't think I want to waste 7 hours of my everyday time for the rest of my life.
Lagos is currently ranked in the top 5 least livable cities in the world. But although the city's economy is bigger than Kenya's, simply getting to their desks is a daily ordeal for its millions of workers.
So when do you see your children?
Weekends only. Sometimes I see them during the week if they really want to see me and they're keen to see me. Sometimes they miss me that much.
That must be quite difficult.
Yes, it is, but it's what we have to do for now.
Like millions of Lagosian workers, Abraham's first act on getting to work in the morning is to take a nap.
There we go. And welcome to my office.
So what are you going to do now?
I think I have, this is quite early, this is 7:10. So I'll take a nap for like 30 minutes and get ready for work.
2,000 people migrate permanently to Lagos every day, straining the city's infrastructure further and expanding the city from the land to the sea. The result is slums like Makoko, a floating settlement on the city's lagoon.
The infrastructure has not kept pace with the population growth. So basic measures of quality of life, just as access to clean water, for example, access to electricity, are limited. So before you even get to issues related to growth and development, Lagos and Nigeria have to sort out much more basic issues of infrastructure.
Makoko is the oldest slum in Lagos. 80,000 people live here, in buildings sitting on stilts, connected by a complex system of canals.
Successful cities find ways to deliver services to even the most deprived. And that's the challenge, especially in the developing world where resources are at a premium.
In Makoko, residents have developed their own infrastructure, including fresh water and electricity. And this 3-story floating school, which doubles as a community centre, is the latest addition to this unique environment. The school was completed in 2013. It is cheap and easy to build. Its designers hope it will become a template for future buildings in Makoko.
Makoko in Nigeria raises interesting questions of governance and control. For example, it's been a long ignored area, and the local residents took charge and tried to improve their own lot with schools and with their own locally initiated development projects. However, the central government also has decided it wants that area for its own development reasons.
Only a few kilometres away lies an alternative vision of how Lagos might develop. Not a grassroots community vision, but a grand project of incredible scale. Echo Atlantic.
Well, where we are standing, we are in the alignment of the financial district, what we call Echo Boulevard, or some people call it our Fifth Avenue. This is where all the major financial institutions will establish their headquarters and offices.
Echo Atlantic is a multi-billion-dollar residential and business district built on 10 square kilometres of reclaimed land. It is, in effect, a new city, or it will be soon. Its backers hope 250,000 people will one day live here, with 150,000 workers commuting from the old city across the water.
When we initially started to conceive Echo Atlantic, obviously we looked at Canary Wharf in London, we looked at Dubai, and if you look at the heart of London, heart of Paris, heart of New York, obviously the vast majority of the residents are wealthy people. I couldn't afford to live in the heart of London. But in creating the residence for these people, you're also creating job opportunities. And it is the norm here in Nigeria that when you create a residential apartment, you also create quarters for the domestic staff working for that family. You have to take it into context that this is a city development. This is not a low-income settlement. It's a business centre primarily. This is the future for the commercial development of Lagos. There's no doubt about it.
David hopes the first residential units will be open by the end of 2016, with the infrastructure of the whole site in place by 2022.
Projects like Eco-Atlantic raise as many questions as they answer, especially from where local residents are aware that they may be getting the short end of the stick. On the other hand, they really do lend themselves to starting from scratch and being able to build structures where there are schools, hospitals, offices, transportation facilities, and they give gigantic cities like Lagos an opportunity to create a model of what can be, presuming they're planned and executed correctly.
The future paths of megacities like Lagos remain uncertain. Organic, citizen-led growth like Makoko, or large-scale planned development like Eco-Atlantic. What's clear is that left unchecked, growth could destroy cities' immense potential.
I'm an optimist when it comes to cities. I grew up in New York City in the 70s when the city went to the edge of bankruptcy. And here we are in the 21st century, and New York is booming and thriving, and it's a tremendous place. And you can see with proper planning and a diverse and vibrant population what's possible.
I hope that those global cities will be extremely interconnected in the sense that they will have solidarity networks, in the sense that they will have resiliency networks, and in the sense that their citizens will feel like their city is where they want to be, their city is the sort of the project that they want to build, but that they can move, they can visit each other, they can learn from each other at the global stage.